while you wait for that perfect cover letter and to have that perfect form, whatever, there may be like 20, 30, 100 people ahead of you applying. And the reality is people stop when they find someone that they think they're good enough.
This is the Industry of UX, Season 2, Inside the UX Hiring Journey. We talk to the experts to bring you the strategies, the thinking process, and the reasoning behind the hiring decisions in the UX job market. Let's dive into the episode. Hello, you wonderful UXers. Welcome back to another episode of the Industry of UX. I'm your host, Filippo Lavotti. I'm glad to be here with you today. And we're already at episode 3 of season 2. And today I have another great international guest because we get to chat with Morgane Peng, Director of Experience Design at Society Generale Banking. Morgane has written quite a few articles on Medium, and I'll put the link to her Medium collection in the show notes. Go check them out. There is one article that Morgane wrote about 6 months ago that specifically talks about UX jobs. It's called 11 Realities on Finding Your First Job. And it's a great article that speaks to a lot of different aspects of the hiring process that people don't really talk about. So today, Morgane and I start our chat talking about how her hiring process has evolved and how candidates' expectations have changed over time. And after that, we cover the first 2 points from her 11 Realities on Finding Your First Job article, which are, number 1, you don't get hired because you are passionate. And number 2, timing is the biggest factor in a hire. And don't worry, we are going to cover the remaining 9 points in another episode, so keep checking back in every Friday. Let me know what you think about the episode by tweeting at IndustryUX. No offense to Android users, but if you have an iPhone, give us a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us produce a better show and bring the podcast to a bigger audience. Okay, it's time. On to the conversation with Morgane. So why don't we go over the evolution of your hiring process from the moment you started hiring up until now? How did that change?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because obviously when you form a team, you set up some stuff and as long as they work, you're like, it should work for a while. But actually you realize that things need to change because the team changes and, projects, they change, the structure changes. So I would say that 7 years ago, we actually had to build from scratch the team, the design strategy or methodology, the one we wanted to use. And it was really kind of finding those early settlers, like the people who want to have skin in the game, build that with us. So we were really hiring more like for expertise, people who can bring in what they've done in the past or something they are more interested in. And then we kind of build the rest of the team complementing each other, one person at a time. But obviously today, since we have scaled to 20, it's quite different. We have like a design system practice, a user research practice. So I would say we're still looking to hire for complementarity, but it's not so much about skills or what people have been doing. I guess it's much more about potential because we know that if there's someone with potential, that person at some point, they will find something they like to do more in the team and then they will specialize with, or maybe they will even set up their own practice on something. That's actually what happened with analytics. Yeah, so it's kind of funny how things have anywhere to evolve because the world is changing. And even if you feel that you found the perfect formula, it's not the case.
So when it comes to candidate funnel, so let's say starting from the moment you receive an application all the way to making an offer and potentially even accepting an offer, how is that actually the more tactical side of things? How has that changed over time?
So I would say, again, 7 years ago, the team was unknown. I mean, we didn't have anything out there for people to read. So it was, as I said previously, it was very hard to convince people even to interview with us. So the real first people who got interested was more, they were more like coming from networks, not necessarily mine, but people who had family working in banking, who kind of knew a little bit of the design challenges in the industry. Today, I would say our horizon has really changed because we really know we can post something, we can share what we do. And so we really have candidates from all over the place. And what we've put in place is really something much more structured to make sure that we don't miss out, or we try to also lower the bias that we have in our process. So, for example, all the applications, they are screened by 2 volunteers in the team. And so they do it separately, and then they kind of gather together their notes. So that itself takes a lot of time because you have to go through all the CVs, the portfolios. And then we try, because again, everyone is a bit different and has a different kind of angle in the team. And we kind of still try to formalize what we're looking for so that everyone is aware of, what's the criteria to pass, let's say, the first round or the second round. So yeah, it got more, I would say, formal for sure.
Question for you, just to get a couple more details. Do you administer both a design challenge and, say, a whiteboard challenge, or do you gear more towards one versus the other, or do you have another format to, in a way, test the readiness of the candidate?
So usually what we do is we first have a little chat, 30 minutes, just to get a sense of why they applied, explain what we do as well to see if there would be a good match. That's our first round. And then indeed, the second round, we are going to really look at the design skills and what they've kind of learned or done over in the past experience. So part of that is we actually have like a challenge, but that is done during the session. So I know there's a lot of discussion, I would say, on design challenge, like take-at-home challenges. I find out that it is possible to assess someone's skills during the interview. That's what we do. We have a challenge of 30 minutes. So we give them a brief, we give them a few minutes to ask questions, and then usually we let them do, think a little bit of, what they want to, how they want to structure the answer and what they want to do. And then when we come back 30 minutes later, we can talk through their points. And I would say that honestly is enough for us to assess whether someone has the skills we are looking for. Maybe that's just the only instance where we weren't sure, it was for someone who was straight out of the bootcamp. And so we were not sure. So first in the portfolio, like in bootcamps, they have this kind of pre-made formula sometimes.
Yeah.
So we were not sure how much of the portfolio was really from that person, if it was like a team project, etc. And the test was maybe ambiguous. So we kind of gave the person the option to kind of expand a little bit at some points where we're not sure, but that was completely optional. The person did it, and actually I can proudly say that today we hired him from an internship, and then we hired him full time.
Nice.
So yeah, I'm actually very happy that we actually gave him the opportunity to do a little bit more. Right. Compared to the other candidates who had like a more classic education. So I feel like it's hard, this question, because you still need sometimes to give people flexibility in the process.
Yes.
Otherwise, you may miss out on amazing people that we ended up hiring.
Okay, let's change gears a bit, shall we? I know you have written quite a few articles on Medium, and one of my favorites is Designing Without Chaos. But the one that I'd like to focus on today, and it's spot on for this season, is 11 realities on finding your first job. I think it will be beneficial for our listeners if we went point by point and cover all 11. I think they are very meaningful and worth covering. So let's start maybe with a basic question. How did you get the idea for the article?
Well, when we had to hire for our last junior position, as I said earlier, we had 300 applicants. And I realized that some people, because obviously when you start doing something a lot and we had to screen and interview a lot of people, you start to notice patterns. And what I noticed is some people were clearly trained. They were having the right behaviors. They didn't know how to pitch themselves. And some people were really kind of just going out of school, kind of not really knowing how to do an interview. And I was like, this is just it's kind of sad that they're not in the know, because maybe they don't have their parents or their family to train them, or maybe their network, or maybe their school, because sometimes schools, they don't do that. I was lucky because my school did these kind of mock interviews. So I was kind of a little bit prepared, but I know some schools or some unis, they don't do that at all. And so I was like, this is just so sad, because again, it's nothing linked to the individual. It's just because they don't know it. And so I started to write down some notes of stuff I've noticed. I compiled a list. I think I first shared them on Twitter. And then obviously, because people were asking questions and follow-up questions, I was like, okay, I need more space to write more stuff. And that ended up being in a Medium article.
All right, let's go with point number 1. You don't get hired because you are passionate. Why not?
So I'm not saying that you should not be passionate, because obviously if you go in there and you're like, I don't care about design, I don't care about whatever, you're not going to be hired. But that's not going to be the reason why you are hired. Because again, you have to think that you're probably one candidate among others, and all the other candidates, they will probably say they are passionate. Nobody's going to say the reverse.
I mean, can you imagine that? Have you ever had one applicant that comes in and said, oh yeah, I'm not passionate about design, by the way. I'm just applying for this, but I'm not passionate.
Yeah. I'm just here because I saw a link, and that's it. Yeah, it's not possible. So don't waste your time on a given, because basically what happened is like this probably interviewer will see many, many other candidates, and those candidates, they will say that they are passionate as well. So that doesn't allow you to stand out from the rest, from the group. And it's funny, because as designers, we know about all the Gestalt principles, the proximity, things that are grouped the same, are grouped together. And if you want to stand out, you have to visually differentiate the item.
Exactly.
But here it's the same. If you want to stand out, and if you say exactly the same thing as all the other candidates, you won't. And I think it's probably something that junior people tend to do a lot, because they just out of school or just out of a bootcamp, they want to fit in. So they want to exhibit the same traits of the other people. But by doing that, they're just like everyone else. And it's going to be very hard just to even remember the candidate if you're so similar to all the other candidates. So you have to leverage on what makes you different.
However, where would you draw that line? Because in a way, I understand why juniors will want to be, in a sense, they will want to conform, because they are told that there is a certain expectation from them. And so they want to match that expectation, because they may not really know what is helpful in make them stand out. I would imagine that someone will be a little bit worried that something could make them stand out, but not in a good way, if you know what I mean. And so how do you think, what advice would you have for these folks that want to stand out, but they also want to make sure that they can stand out in a good way, and not, in a way that makes them, I don't know, that throws off the entire hiring conversation?
That's an interesting question. I would say, and maybe sometimes it's not everyone knows that, but in the hiring process, there's different steps. And in those different steps, there's different things to validate as a hiring manager. So if you made it to the interview stage, that means that someone screened you before and looked at your portfolio and looked at what you've done previously, or looked at your resume. So that means that if they even consider you for a chat, because that's time for everyone, that probably means you're already passing the kind of basic criteria of, okay, can this person design and work on a project? So that's why, in that sense, when you get to talk to the hiring manager for the first time, probably what they want to check is your motivation, just get a sense to know you. And I would say, if you've passed this screening already, it's okay to mention what you've done before. Okay, to give you a real example, because I'm thinking about someone I mentored recently. It's someone who was looking for a job. She got it, by the way, and she did a boot camp. But she didn't want to kind of say what she was doing before. So she kind of hid what she was doing before. So she just had a portfolio with a few projects. And obviously, if you did a bootcamp with just a few projects, you can't compete with someone who spent 5 years studying design at uni. Obviously, they would have a lot more references, a lot more projects. But what was really interesting with her profile is before she was owning her own business. I think she was running a plant flower shop. And when I was just chatting with her, I learned that she had to get up at like 4 a.m. every day to take care of the business, that she was dealing with her own stuff. And to me, I was like, okay, look, you don't have to put that among your design projects, but it can be a separate section. Because to this day, I remember I talked to someone who gets up every day at 4 a.m. to collect the plants. And that may not be something I would be willing to do, but I know that she would have a very strong work ethic because she was dealing with her own business, dealing with, all the suppliers, dealing with everything. And that's a very strong point. And she definitely, I think she was really scared to stand out because she didn't want her previous experience to mix with the design aspect of things. But again, it's when you push, I would say, for this information and the angle, how you sell it. Because obviously if you say, oh, I was interested in flowers before and then I'm interested in design, I'm very passionate in design now, that's not going to convince everyone. But yeah, if you say, I used to run my business, I get up super early, I have a very strong work ethic with a real example, that not everyone can say. And by the way, now I'm super, super game on design and I want to work in this field, a lot more convinced.
Yes, that is a great point. Sometimes, I had the same experience as a mentor when you have mentees that almost want to hide what they did before. And I tell them, look, no. As a hiring manager, this is very valuable to me because I'm not hiring you as a robot that can do UX. You're a person. I want to understand you as a person. And I know that people have a lot of different passions, a lot of different hobbies and things that they do. And I want to learn a little bit more what you bring to the table outside of the UX skill set. Right. For instance, your example is perfectly, I think, hits the nail on the head because this person has a very strong work ethic. Who wouldn't want to have a designer that on top of having a good skill set for UX also has a great work ethic? That makes a lot of difference. Because I've seen firsthand folks that do not have a great work ethic and they can be great designers, but at the end of the day, there is little to show for that. And so it's an amazing skill set. And it's such a shame that they decide to hide it because it was not necessarily applied to design. It was applied to a different industry. But I think that you put it very well. If you're able to package it in a way that makes sense. Of course, if you come out, as you said, saying, yeah, I was passionate about flowers and now I'm passionate about design, that doesn't necessarily, exactly.
Hire me.
That doesn't necessarily work. But if you're able to, and I think you mentioned this in your article too, if you're able to make a statement and then bring in an example to support that statement, then it doesn't matter if that example is necessarily extremely related to design. Of course, you shouldn't be hinging your entire UX application or your hiring process around something that is not UX related or design related. That would be a little silly because, at the end of the day, we are hiring someone that can do design. But of course, if the core is design and UX experience and motivation and all of that, and then around it, you sell yourself as a person that has a lot of different skill set, that has a lot of different passions, that has a lot of experience outside of UX, well, that makes you much more likely to stand out versus someone that sells as a great UX machine, right?
Yeah, and I guess that's something, I'm not sure I put that in the article, but I definitely remember that when I was looking for my first job, I really wanted to fit in and be like the perfect cliche of the perfect candidates somehow. And I remember I I had a friend that I helped that wasn't in design. She was in nanophysics, something very engineering and geeky. And she was in the academic world, and she was trying to find a job outside. She wanted to graduate from the academic world. And I could understand why she wouldn't get past the first interviews, because like she was a very likable person. And so I offered her to do a mock interview. And what I realized during the mock interview is she was behaving like at school, like super academic, super cold. And she wasn't like that in reality. She is someone who likes to do jokes and I was like, why are you so serious? And she was like, because that's an interview. And I was like, but you know that the people interviewing you, they're trying to assess if they really want to spend up to, 8 hours per day with you. And if you're cold like that, who wants to work with you? It's like, and you're not like that in reality. So stop pretending you're someone that you're not. But the thing is, I was the same. I thought I had to be super serious. I mean, you have to be serious, obviously. Don't swear too much, but you still need to give people a sense of who you are, because they're going to spend a lot of time with you.
Instead of serious, I would say professional, right? You can be informally professional, meaning that you can still joke, you can still have a playful or an informal attitude that is also appropriate and professional. I think that, that's exactly the type of person that, because again, like as you mentioned, of course, we want to make sure that you have the skill set and all of that, but you are also going to be a culture fit. So you want to make sure that not only you're compatible with the culture, but vice versa. And so there is a lot that could be said about that. And there is a lot more that could be said between the contrast between academia and what I would call the real world, the world where we live in. There is a big difference there, but that's almost a season on its own. I know that we have a few more minutes, so I wanted to tackle point number 2. I think that point number 1, we've gone above and beyond so far, but I want to tackle point number 2. Timing is the biggest factor in a hire.
Yeah. So I feel like I need to tell my story again here, because that's exactly a mistake that I did when I was looking for my first job, which is I wanted to save the best opportunities for the weekends or for when I have time, so I could write the perfect cover letter. I could tweak perfectly my CV. I could, do everything perfectly. But sometimes I realized that by the time I reached the weekend, the ad was gone. And now that I'm on the other side, I can guarantee that do not wait, because once something is out, things start to pile up. And so I would say if you're organized as a team, you start looking at the candidates. If you're not organized, you kind of do everything at the last minute. But most of the time, people will do it by order of arrival. So kind of first come, first served kind of thing. So while you wait for that perfect cover letter and to have that perfect form, whatever, there may be like 20, 30, 100 people ahead of you applying. And the reality is people stop when they find someone that they think they're good enough or they're good. They're not going to wait forever to find the perfect candidate or that perfect person, because it's just not and that's not how it works. And even with you, when you look for a product or you want to buy something, you don't do like a market-wide research. You look at what is available right now, who's the best candidate for that, and go for it. So that's kind of sad, but I think, something that people really don't realize. And okay, to give you again a real example, I feel like I need to give you real examples here. When we had those 300 applicants for junior position in London, we had to close the ad early because that was way too much. We couldn't screen so many people. So usually when you publish, for us at least, I don't know for the other companies, but like when you publish a job ad, maybe it's there for months or months and a half. And I think we had to close the ad after 2 or 3 weeks because we had too many people. And we knew that in that bucket of people, because we've seen the first candidates were already very strong. So we were pretty confident that we would find someone, a junior again, there was a junior. So a junior in those 300 people. So why wait and maybe end up with like 600, applications to screen? And so we had to close early. But the thing is like, if you wait, maybe you would miss the opportunity. And also, if you wait that, I don't know, perfect moment to start looking, maybe you wouldn't see as well the ad anyway.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe it's me becoming an old man, but the older I grow with age, the less I appreciate perfection. Meaning that I realize that perfection is an eluding idea. There's no such a thing as a perfect thing. It's always depending on context, moment, timing. Which timing? I think timing is luck, but that's another completely different episode. But you're totally right. And normally, when we, as a hiring manager, when we start looking for a position, we are looking because we need that person to start working. It's not just because we love going through the hiring process so much that we just do it for the sake of the hiring process. So if we need that person, we need it relatively timely manner. So it's better as a candidate to send in a resume or a portfolio that is, or what have you, even a cover letter that is not perfect, but that at least you have a foot in the door, compared to going to perfection and then missing that opportunity altogether. So and it's also true if you get a rejection, because sometimes you may need to flex that muscle that allows you to be efficient quickly, to quickly personalize your cover letter, quickly personalize your portfolio or your resume. Maybe you need to flex that, and you have to learn how to be able to do that. But that's just the reality of it. We're not gonna necessarily leave the rack open indefinitely because we want to find you necessarily, right? So it's good that every time you personalize a portfolio, maybe for an industry, it's good to also save it and leave it there, saving in a folder where, like, if you know that you are applying for fintech and then you apply for retail and you find another job in fintech, maybe you can reuse that resume that's tailored for fintech, so that also that saves you a little bit more time. But at least, as you said, like, at least you apply in a timely, efficient manner, and you just don't waste that opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And it maybe something that is not really related, but somehow it is. But I know if many people realize that when they first started looking for a job, is probably that's the only time in your career, or like one of the few times you will do that, because as you kind of develop your experience and your network, probably in the future, how you will apply is going to be very different to what you're doing now, which is obviously when you, as a junior, you're going to probably go on job boards, apply there. But once you start, as I said, to develop your network, maybe your next job is going to be someone who reaches to you, or maybe like a recruiter.
Exactly.
And that obviously is going to be completely different. So that's why don't spend too much time, because the most important, and you said it, is to get your foot in the door.
Morgane, we are running out of time. I know that we were able to cover only 2 out of 11, so you have to come back, absolutely, so we can cover the remaining 9. That will be 9, yes. Good math. Before we leave,
Thumbs up.
Exactly. Before we leave, I wanted to ask you, if people listen to this and are really interested in reading more about you or contacting you directly, where they can find you online?
So they can go on Twitter. I try to be active there. Obviously, on the Medium article where there's those 11 tips, I try as well to, although I'm not that reactive on LinkedIn, I'm also there. So yeah, basically all the kind of social media you can expect. So it's most of them are just my first name and family name. So Morgane Peng. And yeah,